Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. And today we're hopping back into our series where we are predicting every single Power 4 team's record for the 2024 college football season. So let's get right into the video. Taking a look at the Ole Miss Rebels schedule, we see they have an extremely difficult start to the season with games against Furman and MTSU. Those should be a piece of cake for the Rebels and a little bit of a warm-up for the team before they make a road trip to Wake Forest. This game has some upset potential, but I wouldn't be too worried about it. Now, the October 12th matchup against LSU on the road is going to be a tough game for sure, as is the home matchup with Oklahoma, and of course the home matchup with Georgia on November 9th. In total, the Rebels have 7 home games and 5 away games, as well as 4 games against top 25 opponents in our top 25, which we released a few days ago. This gives them an overall schedule difficulty of 6.5 out of 10. The Rebels have 5 guaranteed wins on their schedule. That includes the entire non-conference slate with Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, and Georgia Southern. And we also included their road trip to Arkansas. Even though it's an SEC matchup, I just don't think that Arkansas has the talent to match up with Ole Miss. So we're going to go ahead and give Ole Miss the win in that game. Kicking off the likely wins, we have a home game against Kentucky. Now, this is kind of the same thing. I just really don't see Kentucky having the talent to match up with Ole Miss, but I do think they're a little bit better than Arkansas, and they're going to put up just a bit of a fight for about a half before Ole Miss, with their offensive firepower, is able to pull away. Next, we have 2 road trips to South Carolina and Florida. And I think both of these games are going to be a bit more difficult for Ole Miss, but they should still be able to pull out the win. Florida's going to be a little bit tougher. It's always really hard to go into the swamp and win, but Florida just hasn't been quite the same team that they once were, so I think Ole Miss should be able to get it done. And finally, we have their matchup at home against Mississippi State to end the year. Now, this is rivalry week. Anything can happen. So you always have to put these games in at least the likely win category because nothing is guaranteed. I think Mississippi State will probably give Ole Miss a good fight this year. Probably will be within single digits because this is normally a pretty close game. Don't really see either team running away with it, but I do think it'll be Ole Miss that is able to pull out a victory. Now, there are 2 games which are toss-ups on the Rebels schedule. They are back-to-back with a bye week in between, and we started off with a road trip to LSU. This is going to be an incredibly difficult game for Ole Miss. LSU is a very talented team. This is coming in the middle of the season when teams are going to be starting to peak. I think this really just comes down to which team can do that first. If Ole Miss can hit their stride by this game, they'll probably have a good chance of winning it. But LSU will have had plenty of time to break in their new quarterback. So I think that there's a good chance LSU is able to protect their home turf and win this game. But it's definitely not something that Ole Miss should be counted out of quite yet. Same can be said for Oklahoma. This game is on October 26th, and this is luckily for Ole Miss at home, so it'll be a bit easier than the matchup against LSU, but Oklahoma is still a very talented team. It's their first year in the SEC, so it's always going to be really hard to predict what's going to happen, but I think they'll go in and give Ole Miss a really good fight on the road, and this will be a very close game. Finally, we have Georgia as a likely loss for the Rebels. This game is at home for Ole Miss. However, I just think that Carson Beck and the Bulldogs are going to be too strong and too powerful as they've dominated the SEC the last few years. And I really just don't see any team except maybe Texas being able to take down the Dogs. This really is their conference this year, along with Texas, and I don't really think any of the other teams are quite going to be able to compete with the Bulldogs. Now, taking a look at the schedule recap, I think that Ole Miss is actually going to start off the season 9-0 going into that matchup with Georgia. I think that'll be a matchup of undefeateds. And that does include that road trip to LSU. I think Ole Miss is going to be slight favorites, and I think they're going to get it done. Now, you never know what exactly will happen, but I think the one key factor playing in Ole Miss's favor is the quarterback experience. Jackson Dart has an extra year of starting experience under his belt, and I think that's what's going to make the difference. And the same can be said for Oklahoma. Both of those were in the toss-up categories, but I think Ole Miss is just talented enough that they'll be able to get both of those wins. Now, as you can see, we have the projected record sitting at 11-1, but the projected record is sitting at 9.95 and 2.05. So there's a good chance they might drop one of those LSU or Oklahoma games, but I think in the end, Ole Miss finishes about right where they usually do at 11-1. FPI is not quite as high on the Rebels as we are. They have Ole Miss finishing 7.9 and 4.1. So I'm not really sure where their fourth loss would even come in. But it seems to be that FPI doesn't think the Rebels are going to have as good of a year, even though they give them a 21% chance to make the playoffs and almost a 1% chance to win the national championship. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video tomorrow.